Hi, this is Kelly from A Truth in Story, and for those of you who did not watch the part one sort of rambling introduction discussion of this deck, I'm going to do a kind of quick overview before we move into the cards. So today we're looking at the Chrysalis Tarot. The artwork is by Holly Sierra, and the structure of the deck, as well as the text in the little white book, is done by Tony Brooks, and it really was sort of a collaborative effort between the two of them, with Holly doing the artwork but Tony not just doing the text, but really kind of sitting down and restructuring how the deck was going to be, how the suits were going to change, and all that sort of thing. So it definitely was a collaborative process. Now, just as a quick overview, the names on the major arcana have, some of them, been changed. Some of the concepts in the different cards have definitely been changed, but the traditional titles for the major arcana have remained on the cards themselves. The suits have changed their type, but they do stay true to the elemental energy of the suit, which is what's most important to me. And the court cards have all been changed from away from kings and queens and pages and knights. That sort of political authority has been shifted over to a troupe of minstrels, because entertainers and such. The author notes that they wanted to pull it away from that sort of political authority that we really have no connection with today. Now, I would argue that we really don't have any connection to a troupe of entertainers, minstrels, troubadours so much either, but it's certainly more accessible to people today than the idea of kings and queens. However, the original title is also below the court cards. The box is a fairly it's a nice box. I mean, I will say, for just a regular cardboard box, it's sturdier than most and not as sturdy as some. So it's a nice mediocre box. You certainly could keep your cards in there if you wanted to. It comes with a little white book. The little white book is just a little white book. There are no images in it. There is just a brief introduction, and then it goes right into giving us the number, the Chrysalis' version of the card name, the traditional title, the attributes or keywords of that particular card, and then about a paragraph of text. Now, one of the things that the major arcana does is pulls in archetypes from all different cultures, but it isn't always clear, where they're from. So I've kind of gone through and made note of that, so I will point that out as we go along. I do think a one sentence, this is so-and-so from Greece, Greek mythology or something like that, would have been helpful in the guidebook. Sometimes the information's there, sometimes it's not. The backs of the cards are gorgeous. It is reversible. The guidebook does not give reverse meanings, but we have these two stunning butterflies with a mandala or mandala. The cardstock is wonderful. It's thick, but it's not too thick. It's got a beautiful matte or satiny matte finish to it that's just wonderful. I mean, the cards really are fantastic. There is a tarot app for this for your phone, which I have. There is no more text than what you receive in this little white book. I will say quickly that the images that you see online, as well as certainly the images that you see in the tarot app, are much more jewel toned. I was surprised and pleasantly surprised when I opened this deck that it's stunning and the colors are extremely rich, but it is not the really bright colors that you see. That may be a downside for somebody ordering this, or it may be a plus side, so I want to make sure that I mention that. So we're going to start with the Major Arcana, and this first card was one of the cards that first made me decide that I was not going to get this deck, because I couldn't really get on board with Merlin as the Fool, although they do have him as the hero, not the Fool here. But I couldn't even get on board with him as the hero, because that would be King Arthur and not Merlin. So that was kind of strange to me and off-putting. But when you do look at the deck itself and listen to him talk about it in this interview, the point of the matter is, well, this is my interpretation, let's be clear. Coming at the tarot deck, we are the Fool. We're the one that is going on this journey of self-discovery. That's the point of this particular deck, is that journey of self-discovery from the Fool to the complete transformation to Psyche, which means rebirth and the soul, in that sense of the keyword for this is ascension. So we're the one that's going on this journey, and Merlin is going to be our guide, and somebody that we trust, and somebody that kind of reminds us to tap into our inner self, reminds us to tap into the collective unconscious, which is also a big theme in this deck. And so he is really more like, well, he's kind of like the little white dog that you see in the Fool card, who is coming along with the Fool, guiding, warning, doing all those things that a companion would do. And we are the person who's reading the cards, or the person we're reading it for is the Fool. So once I kind of, got an idea of that, or a sense of that, that sort of resolved my issues with Merlin being in the position of 0. So so we do have Merlin. He is obviously from the Arthurian mythology, which would be associated with Britain. Then we have here the ravens, and this is traditionally the magician, and the attributes for this are synchronicity and a messenger. For this one, the attributes were new beginnings and healing. So then we have the ravens, which couldn't help but think of Odin's ravens of memory and thought. But they kind of more represent the trickster, and that is from all different cultures. You're going to see tricksters, you have like Loki, Puck from Shakespeare, Coyote. There's all kinds of references to tricksters in all different cultures. So that's what we have there. I'm going to try to move quickly because I do want to point out some of these major things. So this is going to take a little bit longer. So here we have the sorceress, which stands for the high priestess. And this is Morgan Le Fay from the Arthurian legends. Again, would be from Britain. And the keywords are mysticism and magic. We have Gaia, which I think works beautifully as an example of a archetype that works stunningly with the traditional, the Empress. This Gaia is originally a Greek goddess. It certainly has been incorporated by many cultures, I think. So the attributes for this is nurturing and abundance. That's a stunning card. Then we have the Green Man for the Emperor. And the attributes for this are structure and nurturing. And the idea of the Green Man, while I think we often associate this with Celtic, Druid type, British Isle kind of connotations, you actually find images of Green Man carvings in many different cultures. Then we have the Divine Child, and this really steps away from the idea of the Hierophant. They wanted to, as they did with the kings and queens, they wanted to step away from any idea of a religious authority figure. And so here we have the sense of the Divine Child, which kind of ties in with Jung's idea of individuation. The attribute is self-discovery, so this really is about you going inward and being sort of in charge of and in control of your own path and your own journey and your own discovery instead of going to somebody else. And a lot of the images of the frogs transformation, butterflies transformation, there's a lot of the colors were very specific. So there are a lot of details that go into it. Here we have the lovers, which is quite, traditional. It is a Celtic, or it's noted in the book that it's a Celtic marriage that's on here, but this could apply certainly to a lot of cultures. But you do have the kind of Stonehenge thing up here and an idea of the tree of life, so it seems to be quite a Celtic feel to it. Then we have Herne the Hunter, who is the head of the Wild Hunt. So this again would be a British, and this is for the Chariot. And the attributes, so I'm sorry, I was doing bad about that. The attributes for the lover would be unity and oneness, and the attributes for her, Herne would be focus and divine assistance. So that's a little bit different from the Chariot. The divine assistance, I guess I don't really see as traditional, but I could be wrong. Here's another example of it, the archetype they chose really working with the traditional card. We have Mot for justice. This is Egyptian, and the attribute for that is balance. I love this. Here we have the storyteller for the Hermit. And for me, this card is just fantastic just because, well, it's not my birth card. If I chose a card from the tarot deck that is me or is mine, it would be the Hermit. And it's a storyteller, which is also me at my most centered and creative as a storyteller in terms of writing. I love that. Now, obviously, there are storytellers from all different cultures. And there's a lot of imagery here that is quite specific and alludes to all different things. But the attributes are wisdom and contemplation. Then we have the wheel for the Wheel of Fortune. And the attribute for that is consequence. And while this doesn't have a specific culture, it does have this right here is Fortuna, which I want to say is Roman. I did not look that up because it wasn't... I should have looked that up. So anyway, so this does still have the idea of destiny and that kind of stuff. It kind of does stay with like. Then we have Papa Legba, which is a Haitian voodoo archetype, and he has an absolutely stunning face. The artist did an amazing job with him. If this doesn't focus in well, I'll put a scan in because it's a wonderful card. And this is for strength, and the attribute for this is inner strength. And he's another sort of guide that I just think is fantastic. Then we have the Celtic owl instead of the hanged man, and this is obviously from a Celtic idea. We have the Celtic knotwork here, and this is one of the key cards. If you watch the interview with Tony Brooks, he does go over 3 or 4 cards that he would consider to be key for this deck or for kind of unlocking this deck. And this is one of them. And so this really, the Hanged Man is about getting a new perspective in a lot of ways. And so this doesn't completely deviate from this, but this is more about tapping into the unconscious or the collective unconscious. And so the knotwork represents how everything is connected and interconnected, and that we do have the ability, the owl can see in the dark, and so we do end up having that ability to connect to and see and learn from all of these archetypes and information from different ages and different cultures. Try to say rebirth is the attribute for this card. Here we have Eridine or Aradne. I mean, I think it's Eridine. That's how I'm going to say it. For the Death card, which I think, and the attribute is transformation, and I think this is stunning. Now, she's originally a Greek goddess, I believe, but she is also, I think, incorporated into some Celtic. There's a lot of crossover with sometimes name changes and sometimes not. But this is a beautiful card for death, because here we have her standing at the gates of time, and she's holding, she's in front of a labyrinth, and she's holding a yarn so that you can take it in and not get lost as you go inward, basically this idea of going inward. And she's holding the Minotaur, the Greek Minotaur, which is, something that you have to fight in when you go into the labyrinth. And this is really about our shadow selves and sort of going in and meeting our shadow selves, negativity, all different kinds of things that we need to take ownership of and forgive and incorporate fully into ourselves. Then we can come out transformed as a card. I just think it's a beautiful death card. Here we have the golden flower for temperance, and the attributes for this is harmony and meditation. This is a mandala with fish and butterfly, and it does have some Chinese characters, although, I don't really relate this to any specific culture. And so this attribute, again, is harmony and meditation, and the fish and the butterflies, they do represent specific things to do with harmony. So then we have Bella Rosa as the devil. Now I couldn't find Bella Rosa as really a specific, like goddess or anything like that. But it does come out of, or it talks about in the guidebook, the Carnival de Venezia, which would be Italian. And that sort of idea of the masquerade you certainly get. And I just think this is a stunning devil. The attribute is detachment, and she certainly has that idea of, we all wear masks that we put out for other people to see, that kind of hides who we are. But then the danger becomes if we get caught up in believing this, persona that we've made for ourselves instead of our authentic self. And the mirror kind of represents narcissism. The rose was in some way supposed to talk about detachment, but it does have the sign of the Ouroboros with that sense that we can unify those images and kind of get out of the cycle and kind of complete a cycle of rebirth. So I do think that's a really interesting devil card. For the tower, we have Kali, which is a Hindu goddess, and she's about the cleansing energy of creation or creative destruction. So that idea of sometimes we need destruction in order to kind of clear the way for there to be balance restored and start to rebuild. For the star, we have Elpe, which is a Greek sky goddess. And the attributes for this one is hope and choices. Next we have the moon, which obviously is not from any specific cultural reference. I do love how we have the moon surrounding sort of this island, and being able to take that time to work on your goals and aspirations and positivity. And we have this little person over here, full of joy as they succeeded. We have kind of image of a key back here. There's some images overlaid on top of it that are quite interesting, but it's a beautiful card. Then we have a sun here. I'm not overly fond of faces and suns. I often find them to be quite creepy. This one's not too bad. We do have a tear here, but this is not for sadness. This is about, the tear is supposed to be about tenderness. And the attribute for the sun is empowerment. And the attribute for the moon, is reflection. And then we have the phoenix, which is judgment, which is one of those I do think actually works with the original traditional meanings. And the attribute for this is resolution. The phoenix, I think, can oftentimes you think of like Greek or Roman, but I think that it's one of those things that also shows up in a lot of different cultures. And finally, we have Psyche, which is that sort of where we complete this. And Psyche comes from Greek mythology and actually means soul or butterfly, which is where we get this idea of the chrysalis and the butterflies on the back. And sort of the whole point is reaching this ascension, which is the attribute for this card. And So I do think that's just a stunning full cycle for the major arcana. And it does make me think of C.S. Lewis has a book. I think it's one of the last novels that he wrote about the story of Psyche, which is called Till We Have Faces. That is absolutely stunning. Probably has nothing to do with the meanings of this card, but it just made me think of it. And it's a beautiful book, and I would highly recommend it, which is quite the ramble off. So there we have the major arcana. I'm kind of splitting these off because I just want to make sure to hit on specific changes. So next we have the minor arcana, and they have been changed from, we have Pentacles have been make sure I keep these in. Pentacles have been changed to stones and have a beautiful green overtone to the cards that, you know, I think all of the suits have beautiful tones that, you know, in a larger spread you can really see the energy flow, which I really appreciate in cards. The cups have become mirrors, which I love. In the Shadowscape tarot, the cups to me really give me that feeling of water as a mirror and that sense of diving inward. Oftentimes you'll have like the mermaid diving deep for sort of inner reflection. So I do think the mirror works beautifully for the cups, and we certainly have a beautiful blue overtone with those cards. For wands, we have one of the bigger changes because we have spirals instead of wands. And so you don't have really any of those really in this deck at all. There's no pointy, sharp representations of suits. So we have the spirals, and we have very yellows and oranges and greens. And then for the swords, we have scrolls and a beautiful purple overtones to them. And I actually really like the idea of the scrolls for the swords because, you know, it is about the intellect, and, you know, we don't generally, none of us really experience things from swords and battle anymore. And so I think that that's kind of the notion of the deck, is sort of to reclaim some of the traditional imagery to stuff that we might relate to a little bit more. So I do think the idea of the scrolls with the intellect do work. Okay, the first we're going to look at is the stones, and I absolutely love the stones in this deck. Other than the very last card, the 10 of stones, which gets a little bit pushing close to too cute for me. This deck is a very sweet deck, and for the most part, it's a sweet and beautiful deck. It doesn't go stray, for the most part, over into what, for me, is just a little bit too cutesy, except for just a couple cards, and one of them being the last. But other than that, I think this suit is absolutely stunning. There are, in the tarot app that you can get for your phone, there are keywords on the bottoms of even the minor suits cards, which I can see being helpful just because some of them have changed from the traditional sense. But it also stops you. You know, the point of this deck is for you to kind of come out and play and fall into the story of the deck. And so, you know, even putting a keyword there is going to somewhat hinder you. But it is helpful, at least when you're first looking at them, to sort of get a feel for where things are going in that particular card. So here we have the Ace of Stones for abundance. Here we have trust, planning, possessions. I love how this is blocking the door where you can't get through if you have too much stuff. Here we have desolation. Here we have caritas, or it's that idea of charity, of love for others and yourself. These specific stones actually stand for with self-love and love for others. Regret, beautiful. Ingenuity. I love this card, and this is one that makes me glad it's not on there, because the keyword for this is indifference, and this is not how I probably would read this particular card. And then we have the Ten of Stones, which is possessive. This one gets a little bit cutesy for me, but it's a cute card. I love the knot work too. So that's the suit of stones. Next we have the mirrors, which are again the cups, and the mirror, or the suit of mirrors, is about nourishment and love in this particular deck. So we have the Ace of Mirrors. We have as feelings, union, compassion, detachment, forgiveness, love that card, memories. This was kind of interesting because all of the 6 pools that we see here are supposed to reflect, if you look in them, they're going to reflect different time periods in your life that have something that is to show you. And this is, I'm not particularly fond of this little guy here, but he is a type of fae that is known for that sort of childlike innocence that we do associate with the 6 of Cups. We have here the 7 of Mirrors, which is the Lady of Shalott. Yes, I've collected many songs and copies of this. So this is discernment. This one I also thought was quite interesting. This is the 8 of Mirrors, and this is sort of like this guy that we have here is like a druid prophet, and these mirrors that are coming down the path, and there's more to it. I'm really not going to go deep into the card, but the mirrors along the path reflect the teaching of all the great sages, across the different, the collective unconscious again, and across time, the different great sages. And so there's a mirror each for selflessness, truthfulness, harmlessness, mindfulness, respectfulness, goodness, peacefulness, and righteousness. So I thought that was really neat. Then we have the 9 of Mirrors, which is for joy, and then the 10 of Mirrors for peace. Next we have the suit of spirals, which would be the equivalent to the wands, and the associations for this suit are about passion and personal growth. So the Ace of Spirals we have as energy. I love this card. Choice. I love this card. Contemplation. Oh, that's a gorgeous card. Solitude. Now here we have the card that was on the front of the little white book. And apparently this is the favorite, one of the favorite cards in the deck of the artist. And it really is one of the key cards for the deck because it is about solitude in terms of the card. But if you look at the image, and if it doesn't show up, I will scan it in. There's a little broom here going into this little house. And the idea here is that we're supposed to sweep away all sort of the preconceived ideas that we have, that we're supposed to, the knowledge that we have, the knowledge that we think that we have, all that. We're kind of just supposed to brush that all away and come at this deck with a fresh mind, come at this experience with a fresh outlook, and sort of that open-chestedness feeling that I get from the Fool in all his different versions, that we want to be open and just come at this deck with that sense of openness to see what we can find. So that's quite beautiful. The 5 of Spirals for success. This I also really loved because I assumed when I saw this, to be honest, that these were Tibetan prayer flags. This is for success is what the key word is, but these are actually Celtic Klooties, Klooties, so cooties with an L. And I didn't know this, and I've studied a lot of Celtic folklore and stories, and this isn't something that I've run across before, but apparently the Celts tied bits of cloth called klooties on trees near springs and wells where nature spirits dwell. As offerings, what the guidebook says. The practice continues today, and they've come to symbolize wishes fulfilled. So I thought that was quite a beautiful card, and I learned something new. Here we have assertion. We have the Eight of Spirals that kind of does look like the traditional Eight of Wands. This is about answers, perseverance, and crossroads, which I thought this was quite interesting because you do have that sense of the 10 of, all the weight, but then you have the crossroads idea here, which is quite interesting. So that was the spirals. And then lastly, we have the scrolls, and these are the traditional sword suits. And in the Chrysalis Tarot, the suit of swords is about intuition and clarity. So here we have the Ace of Scrolls, which is about intuition. The Two of Scrolls is about fantasy. And again, they all have this beautiful purple tones to them that I really love. We have here rejection, although I think for me this can be sorrow and loss. We certainly keep that Three of Swords feel with the tear on the fox, and he definitely looks sad. We have recollection. Oops, sorry. A period of healing. We have Five of Scrolls, sacrifice, consolation, indecision. That was interesting with the two doors. Then we have illusion. I think that was quite beautiful. We have here the Nine of Scrolls, which is despair, and then the Ten of Scrolls as exile. So there we have the suits, the minor suits. Okay, next we're going to look at the court cards. And I know that this is going to be a long video, but because of the changes and because of the conflicting things that I saw in reviews, both written reviews and video reviews, I just wanted to make sure that I covered this thoroughly, and I do think that just kind of doing a quick keyword with it, I just feel like this will give you an idea of where the creators are coming from and whether or not this was something that you would want to work with in a deck or not. So the court cards have been changed from being the traditional king and queen and page and knight, and have been turned into what a troupe of merrymakers, what they talk about here. And in the guidebook, it does say that they're intended to stand in for, so with the major arcana, we had archetypes that were across the collective unconscious that we could tap into. With the court cards, the creators saw them more as friends and family member, acquaintances, and even complete strangers from our past, present, and future, and have been put into our path as messengers and mystics and muses and mentors and different things like that, depending on obviously the particular card that it is. So this is really about, the court cards are really about that understanding that we don't ever walk a path alone. Not only are we tapped into the collective unconscious, but we also are independent with lots of other people in our lifetime at various stages in our lifetime. It does have the traditional tarot name underneath it, which is again one of those things that I think's possibly problematic. Just that maybe it would have been better just to completely just go with the minstrel and not tap into people's or trigger people's knowledge of what the King of pentacles, say, might mean traditionally. So let's not even trigger that. Let's just stick right with the minstrel. So that could be problematic. But I really do think that if you just approach this understanding that we're kind of coming at things differently, that I still think this is going to be quite workable. So here we have the minstrel, which has attributes of being assertive and loyal, and his role is a mentor. We have the artist or the artiste, which is the Queen of Stones, and her attributes are spiritual and magnetic, and her role is as muse. We have the illusionist, who was the Knight of Stones, and his attributes are spontaneous and confusing, and his role is as a mystic. We have the acrobat, which would have been the Page of Stones. The attributes are transition and perspective, and her role is as a messenger. I'm trying to kind of whip through these quickly since I'm adding so much. We have the Sojourner here, who would have been the King of Cups, or here the King of Mirrors. He's empathetic and wise, and his role is as a mentor. Sorry. Then we have the Cups, or the mirror version of the mystic role, which is the Watcher, which I think is beautiful, and the attributes are contemplative and intuitive. Here we have the Dreamer, who is the Knight of Mirrors. His attributes are confident and passionate, and he is a messenger. We have the Page of Mirrors, who is the Healer, and her attributes are youthful and sensible, and her role is as a muse. Then we go to the Spirals, which would be the Wands, and we have the King of Spirals as visionary and an organizer, and he is a mentor. We have the Queen of Spirals, which would be the Muse, she's nurturing and inspiring, and she is a muse. That's a beautiful card. Here we have the Courser, and this would be the Knight of Spirals, and he is independent and strong-willed, and his role is as a mystic, which I thought was quite interesting. Then we have the Mime, who is, I'm not very fond of mimes. I'm going to say that this is not my favorite card. This is the Page of Wands, or Page of Spirals, sorry, and she is incisive and magical. And her role, or his role, I can't really tell, is as a messenger. And then we have the Swords or Scrolls suit. And we have here the Poet as the King of Swords, or Scrolls, sorry. Going back and forth, clearly I'm confused. The attributes are intellectual and logical, and he is a mentor. I love this. We have the Weaver as the Queen of Scrolls. She's diplomatic and tranquil, and her role is a muse. We have the Visionary, who is the Knight of Scrolls. He's a healer and a traveler, and he is a mystic role. And then lastly, we have the Pilgrim, who is the Page of Scrolls, about perseverance and endurance, and is a messenger. So this has been the Chrysalis Tarot. And I don't know how long this candle has been out, but oh well, just pretend that's all nice and flaming. I'm really excited to be working with this deck. I think that it's going to be well worth sort of playing with. I mean, that's really the feel that I get for this. For myself, that this was a deck that I needed to get to just fall into story with. The idea of story with the capital S, and as many people would use, they are quite firm. Need some breaking in, but they do shuffle well. But the idea of story with a capital S, as some people might say spirit, is for me very key. And so I do feel like this deck for me is going to tap in really strongly into that sense of story and let me play with that. I think that it can be quite a healing deck. And I will, as with a lot of my newer decks, I do intend to kind of coming back after I've worked with them for a while and sort of doing an update video on how I found them in terms of reading and such. But I did really want to give a thorough overview because I really did check this deck off of my list as being one that I wouldn't get based on sort of some misunderstandings and some just needing to really take a look at it. So I wanted to make sure that I really covered it good so that you could, if you have this deck and weren't quite sure what to do with it, maybe get a new perspective on it, or if it was one that you're interested in but you really weren't sure about it, make sure that it was quite thorough so that you could make that decision of whether this would be for you or not. So this has been the Chrysalis Tarot by Holly Sierra and Tony Brooks. Thank you for sticking with me so long.